FromSoftware's legacy of crafting deeply immersive, challenging, and ultimately rewarding experiences has inadvertently led to numerous copycats. Challengers to the mantle looking to harness the magic of gruelling, rewarding gameplay. What the games in this rundown prove, if anything, is that developing deep dynamic combat systems is immensely hard. So it's no surprise many attempts at replicating the Soulsborne experience fall flat. There are, however, some developers out there who are content to slap a Souls-like label on their shallow replication. These shameless attempts to make a quick buck feature in this rundown alongside more earnest efforts to craft a Soulsborne experience. Deathrealm. Deathrealm isn't a bad-looking game, which, to be honest, is pretty much all it has going for it. Touted by developer Pipola as a challenging and unforgiving experience whereby players must follow an enemy's movements and fighting patterns to overcome them in battle, the game's fantasy medieval setting evokes more than passing resemblance to Dark Souls. Launched in early access in summer 2021, Deathrealm's dark gothic fantasy world has at least expanded to include a scorching desert oasis populated by winged dragons since, but with very little content being added overall and an initially steep asking price. Although the price is currently a more reasonable £10.29 in the UK, Deathrealm feels more like a shameless asset flip than a game that'll ever be completed. Cycle of the Moon. Described as a Souls-like roguelike, Cycle of the Moon tasks players with fighting through a map, slaying monsters, and devouring dropped souls to level up stats such as stamina or HP, or to acquire new attacks before locating the world's final boss. There is at least a niche concept at play in Cycle of the Moon's ever-draining health bar, adding a sense of desperation to recovering monster souls. But alas, the game's execution is so horrendously janky and underbaked, Cycle of the Moon clearly needed longer than the stated 45 days to develop, not just to improve gameplay but to cultivate its original ideas too. Don't want to sound too harsh though, Cycle of the Moon was made by 3 students after all, and it's currently available for free on Steam. Viking Warrior. Another decent-looking Dark Souls ripoff. However, Viking Warrior is in fact a brazen copycat of Dark Fantasy Warriors, which itself is a mediocre Souls-like influence game from the same developer. This developer, Indie Games 3000 on Steam, recycles Dark Fantasy Warriors' feudal castle and pastoral villages for Viking Warriors levels, but as a meager point of differentiation, inserts Viking assets straight out of the Unity store to serve as the player character. Worse still, there's no purpose or direction to this generic Viking's decisions. Killing enemies doesn't even develop skill points. Unfortunately, Viking Warrior is nothing but a low-effort rehash of one of the developer's own games. Darklight Origin. A third-person hack-and-slash set in a grim, ruined world called Solus, Darklight Origin follows the story of warrior Kenon as they fight to defeat a cult of darkness, unraveling the long-lost secrets behind an ancient terror lurking deep within the landscape. Now, the layout of the game's on-screen UI is almost a carbon copy of Dark Souls, save for the huge circular map in the top right. One reviewer on Steam comments that Darklight Origin's world is unnecessarily large, with an awful lot of space with not much in it. Seems as though the on-screen map is contradictory, not least in discouraging exploratory gameplay true of Soulsborne titles, but also in demystifying a world that's empty anyway. Void Dementia. Okay, so it'd be unfair to label Void Dementia as a complete Soulsborne ripoff. It has enough of a unique visual aesthetic with anime-esque flair to have an identity of its own. It borrows from the Soulsborne rulebook though by requiring players learn patterns and level up, incorporating a raft of challenging foes in which to test player skill. The primary drawback with Void Dementia, however, is the stupidly difficult boss encounters. Developer J2Ysoft seems so hell-bent on replicating FromSoftware's infamous difficulty that they've accidentally surpassed it, rendering Void Dementia's boss battles nigh on impossible. Coupled with repetitive combat and a bare-bones story, Void Dementia is a tough sell. KOGARASHI. Taking command of a fire demon as he scythes his flaming sword through the bodies of frozen spirits in a world of ice is a decent premise for KOGARASHI. Plus, there's heaps of charm and nostalgia in this student-developed title's PS2-era graphics. But KOGARASHI's earnest attempts at immersion fall flat when the protagonist's flaming swords freeze enemies in place. You'd expect them to melt in two, not shatter into pieces of ice. Combat is super repetitive too, although the game's animations are delightful. Like the other student-crafted game on this rundown, it feels a little harsh to lumber KOGARASHI with the worst Soulsborne label. It's a decent attempt with an interesting concept in need of refinement. It's free on Steam, at least. Barbarian Souls. Another third-person hack-and-slash Dark Souls-inspired asset flip for this rundown. Only this time there's no story, no music, no atmosphere, and zero enemy AI. Seriously, enemy barbarians just stand there, statuesque, occasionally swiping their swords, but mostly acting as stationary punching bags. The game's name, Barbarian Souls, is a straight-up riff on Dark Souls 2. This developer clearly thinks labeling their game as Souls-like and giving it a FromSoftware-style title is enough to sell a shed-load. And they probably have sold a few copies of this lackluster game. At nearly £12 in British money though, it's a steep asking price for a game whose Steam trailer is laggy. Only those foolish with money would be spending that amount on a game like this. DOLMEN. Adopting a Lovecraftian cosmic horror aesthetic puts DOLMEN more in league with Bloodborne than FromSoftware's Dark Souls trilogy. There are sci-fi elements to DOLMEN too, with an interesting energy mode that'll imbue melee weapons with elemental status effects to add a dynamism to combat. All the ingredients are there for an interesting spin on the Soulsborne formula, but DOLMEN continually falls flat. From an insipid story in a characterless world steeped in boring lore, to floaty combat and shallow leveling up, DOLMEN continually feels like a chore to play through, and is entirely befitting of its middling 54 score on Metacritic. Decay of Logos. Decay of Logos ticks a lot of boxes. Beautiful art style reminiscent of The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, mysterious, diverse, interconnected worlds stuffed with secrets to explore, an intriguing elk companion used in combat, traversal and puzzle solving. The issue with Decay of Logos, though, is its total lack of quality control. That elk you travel with, well, it's a bug-laden companion who'd be best left in the stables. If the elk doesn't want to help solve the environmental puzzles, then the game is effectively broken. Labeling your games as Souls-like means there are expectations of the depth and dynamism of the game's combat too, and sadly, Decay of Logos has neither engaging combat nor a compelling leveling up system. It's a shame, really. Decay of Logos delivers an immersive, oftentimes stunning world, which would be a joy to explore were it not laced with issues elsewhere. Mortal Shell. Now, Mortal Shell is actually a decent game. Unlike some of these Soulsborne rip-offs in this rundown, Mortal Shell is not an asset flip. It's conceptually sound, and it looks fantastic. It's just Dark Souls made by someone else, isn't it? Almost like a counterfeit product that looks like the real thing, but on closer inspection reveals itself to be fake. Not to say Mortal Shell is phony in any way. No, It's just, if you're gonna do the whole strategic, precise combat thing that Dark Souls and Sekiro Shadows Die Twice are famed for, then go the full hog and make it as unforgiving as possible. Mortal Shell's parry system, for instance, is far too telegraphed and easy to pull off without much practice. There's a reason FromSoftware-inspired titles like Neo have succeeded, and that's because they're tapping into the deep, precise, ultimately rewarding combat of which Soulsborne games are famous. Mortal Shell, sadly, is too easy. So what are your thoughts on this? Go ahead and share them in the comments below. And if you like this video, please subscribe to the channel and enable all notifications by clicking the bell icon to get new video updates. We upload every day and would really appreciate your support. Thanks for watching.